Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, privileged to be joined now by the one and only Minnesota Jack. How are you, Jacko?
I'm good. I'm excited to do this little quick pod with you to discuss some exciting things in the future, the near future, even.
I was going to say the very near future, possibly the present, depending on when people are listening to this particular episode. Um, Very exciting announcement to be made. Here on the JBSE, and that is that along with jumping onto episodes with me, talking about whatever it is, NFL or whatever it might be, uh really glad to be welcoming you in to your own little room in the JBSE house. You are going to be doing your own podcast episodes under the umbrella of the JBSE, which is very exciting. And it is called Markers Up with Jack Johnston. So do you want to fill the people in on this very exciting announcement?
Sure. Well, I feel like I've gone through my podcast school in a sense. I've been doing the, NFL content with you for, we've been doing episodes on and off for a long time. And then this past season sort of came on as a regular guest. And then a couple of years ago, I did my own Western Bulldogs podcast, which is a team in the AFL, and just did it for 1 year just to kind of test it out and give it a shot. And then, the year later came back and did the pod with you. And so I feel like I've tried a few different things, and the AFL season's coming up. It's about a month and a bit away. And as it was getting closer and closer, I was having all these thoughts about Aussie rules and the season coming up and all the storylines. And I just kept thinking of things I wanted to talk about, was talking to you and other people about them. And then the idea of doing a podcast kind of became more friendly an idea as time went on. I sort of first thought, I don't know if will be able to commit to it. Will I have enough to say? Will it really
Am I just
be
another white guy with a podcast,
Yeah, no. There's not enough white guys, all right? There's you and I, that's it.
Yeah,
And I was
it's
just
a
sort of
really
having some doubts about
underrepresented demographic.
it. I've got to represent. But then as time went on, as it got closer and I got more and more excited about the season upcoming, and as well as what the podcast could be, it became pretty clear that I had to take a step and go ahead and fully plan it and say, yeah, I'm going to do an AFL podcast. And I will admit off the bat, for anyone that will be interested in listening, there will be Western Bulldogs bias. I don't care. And if you don't want bias in your podcast, feel free to check out the billion other podcasts that are out there. I feel like it's better, and I'm sure you can speak to this too. It's better just to be honest, and as opposed to trying to shield yourself or change your opinions on things just because everyone, I don't know anyone who does any kind of sports content and doesn't have a team they follow, because why would you be into sports if you don't at least have a team that you prefer than the others? And so I feel like it's better to just be open about that, but it's going to be all AFL focused. And I think for me, the main thing that I'm thinking about with what I want to do with this podcast is not just do top 8 predictions or round 1 previews and all that. I'm not saying that won't happen, but there's a focus I want to have with this podcast, and that's going in depth in the game. And so that's going to include a lot of analysis, a lot of breaking down games and breaking down tactics that teams are employing. This could be player specific. It could be looking at a specific player and tracking them through a game and sort of pointing out where they dropped off, where they improved, what they've done to impact the game. It could be coaching, could be looking at coaching tactics. But when I talk about in depth, I also feel like what is covered under that brand is in depth into the stories and what makes this sport so magical and mythical and interesting is not so much. It's a bunch of things. It could be off-field things. It could be on-field. It can be history, retrospectives.
Mm.
I like the idea of looking at this great game we have in this country that is, with every passing year, becoming more relevant outside of Australia too, which is amazing. But just looking at this game and going, what other avenues can be explored when we talk about it? Because I think that there's a specific lane that a lot of mainly like corporate content, like your Fox Sports and Channel 7 and that, there's a lane that they fit in and they have to, and that's great because otherwise
Mm.
every lane that's possible should be filled with people talking about that stuff. So I'm not knocking it, but that's the lane they occupy. And there's this other lane that doesn't have a lot of traffic in it, which is this in-depth analysis and in-depth storytelling about Aussie rules football. And to start with, it's going to be the men's season because that's what's coming up soon. But it'll also include a lot of AFLW talk once their season starts to get up and running, which I'm really excited to talk about. So that's sort of a not so brief introductory into what Marcus Up is sort of going to be all about.
No, that's great. And obviously, you've talked about, talk with me about starting off, with doing audio content, but the idea of, moving into some video stuff as well, which I think will be really cool for people to look at. I think it's going to be a really exciting journey. Um, if I've learned anything about doing this stuff, it's like it's in trying to show people something about a game, you realize how much you learn. Like,
Mm,
I think that's such a great thing about humans is we learn um, from teaching others. Like you'll probably find, as I've found so often, like when you're analyzing something or thinking about something that y- you're sort of like, oh, I need to demonstrate to people what happened here, and then you come up with all these questions for yourself. You realize there's gaps in your own knowledge, and then in you learning about that, it really does help other people as well. And I'm sure you're going to take to this with a really open mind, and an open sort of ethos, that you know as we often say, we don't know everything. It's just our experiences. That's been a
mm,
big thing for me with the JBSE is like, it's my experience, and not everyone will like the podcast, and that's okay because as you said, there's a lot of lanes that people can put their listenership into. But when we do these things, we should try and put as much of ourself into it. And those that like it will like it, and those that don't won't. Um, can you give a little bit of a preview about what your first episode is going to be? Because I know we're getting a first episode probably within the next 24, 48 hours or something.
yeah.
What can we look forward to?
Well, it's interesting you bring up, learning things when you're doing your own
Mm,
sort of research and how learning is sort of an all-encompassing topic. It's not just the audience that learns, but it's the one who's doing the talking.
mm,
Because this first episode, I was really thinking about what should the first episode be, and your first instincts are season preview, like what will the
mm,
upcoming season be, and sort of all that. And trust me, I'll get to that because that's interesting to talk about. But I was really thinking, what do I really want to talk about? And at the moment, I've really been fascinated. And a part of this is torture, and I acknowledge that, but it's part of the story. Is a bit of a retrospective on the 2021 season, in particular with one player, and that's Marcus Bontempelli, the captain for the Western Bulldogs. And just sort of looking at what could have been, how, and he's got a lot of career left in him. He's only 27 years old. But at this point, how different his career could have been viewed if it wasn't for a few things that changed here and there. And sort of comparing him to players of his era in the AFL era at that age that he's at. But also in researching that, it's brought up this larger topic of how we value players like him, which are impact midfielders, not necessarily accumulators. And so there's a lot of that I want to talk about as well once I sort of get out of the specificness of Bontempelli into a discussion about, how we value midfielders, particularly when it comes to awards and praise. When you're when you're a midfielder that's not all about numbers, you're actually a midfielder that's about impacting the scoreboard and the stuff that can't really be recorded in stats, and how we, as a community, we're not really equipped to recognize that as much as I feel like we should be. I feel like there's a little bit of an imbalance. And so that's what the first episode sort of is about, is having a discussion about that. And, I learned a lot by researching that, because I had my own sort of ideas about what I thought the stats would show, and in very different ways. It was very interesting to sort of look into the specificness of these different players that have played in this AFL era, which is something you and I both sort of agree on, that we really should talk about more the AFL era and not confuse the VFL and the AFL as one unit, because the game was just so much different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I look forward to listening to that. No doubt you'll be highlighting some great players of the modern era. Yeah, well, look, obviously, you know, blessings on your journey. I'm sure it'll be a great one, and I look forward to following it. Yeah, and obviously the space at the JBSE is open as long as you need it, and who knows, you may yet outgrow that and branch out onto your own sort of your own space. But yeah, privileged to it's been a real privilege and a pleasure to have your voice on the NFL coverage this year. And, it's what a blessing to now have you, branching off in your own direction with Markers Up. I think people should definitely go and listen to it. You'll have your own the podcast people will be able to find just in the JBSE feed if you follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Those episodes will just drop in there. So you'll be able to easily identify them. They'll just be Markers Up with Jack Johnson, episode whatever, with the title. And I think your own logo will be able to be going in there as well. So that's an easy way for people to find them. But as far as social media and that, I think you were saying you're going to fire up your own Twitter and all that sort of thing. So
It'll all be up and
make sure
running
you
once
go
the
and
first episode goes out. You guys will be able to get in contact and sort of keep up to date with what Markers Up will be doing. Once the first episode's out, it'll all be launched and people can follow all the, the relevant social medias, assuming I know what they are nowadays. There might be 10 other new ones that I have no idea about.
I've given up on, like I'm just not keeping up with it. It's that thing. I kind of feel that like maybe it might be cutting me off from, an expanded audience, but like I think I'm just happy using Twitter. I think I'm just happy using Instagram. I don't feel the need at the minute to expand to TikTok or anything like that. I think maybe that's all right. Maybe that's a way of really easily defining where my audience is and isn't. And
True.
I don't need to be. I don't. It's a natural dividing line.
You'll be doing TikTok
I think
dances
it
in 2
just
months.
is.
Don't worry.
Yeah, give it time. Give it time. All right, guys. I will let Jacko get off and about his day. I will get about mine. Yeah. So go and have a listen to the first episode of Markers Up with Jack Johnson when it drops, and make sure you follow him Twitter and other places you can find him. Thanks, Jacko.
Cheers.